Hello, Kim.
Hello.
Hi. Hi, Emma. Now, I think we should kick things off straight away as we've got a juicy one for us today. So, everybody, this is Kim Holland, who is a career coach and has been doing that for over 10 years, helping people and the career transitions. But now, as a mum of two boys, 4 and 2, so we feel you there, she completely understands what it means to be a parent and has gone out on her own to support parents with her Parent Career Pivot program. So now she helps parents find the clarity, confidence, and strategy that they need to pursue their new career with their new family, which I know so many of you will be feeling. I know Emma has gone through this, so it would be great to hear your experience throughout our live today as well. So, Kim, I'm going to leave it over to you. You're going to take us through your 5-step pivot roadmap. So please give us a flavour of what you can do to help us with our career
Yeah.
changes, because none of us know.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks, Amy. Thank you for having me. Before I get started, I'll just say that navigating careers in parenthood can be messy, can't it? It can feel overwhelming and it can feel confusing, and things that have always kind of felt so right before and things that we've worked so hard to achieve in our careers then sometimes just feel not right anymore. They don't align with kind of who we are and where we're at. So if you are feeling like that, you are absolutely not alone. Loads of people are in that boat. And and so often people want to make a change, but they just don't know how to do it. And then on top of that, our brains are programmed to keep us safe, not to make us happy. So we have to overcome that hurdle before we can make changes, because our brain wants us to stick with what's familiar, even if it's not making us happy. So yeah, there's a lot to overcome to make a change in your career. So I'll kick off with the first step then. The first thing to do is to get really clear on who you are and who you are now, not who you were before you had children. And there will be some big changes in who you are and what you need out of your career now and what you can offer. So have a think about your skills and your strengths, but not just the ones that you're good at, but which ones do you enjoy using? Because it's so easy to just think about the skills you're good at, but your career might have taken you down a path that means you've got really good at something, but it might not necessarily be something that you love and something that really energizes you and brings you joy. So think about what are the things that you enjoy doing and what are your values and your passions? What is important to you now? And then think about your markers of success, because they will likely have changed. So for a lot of people I work with, previously they were chasing like the status and the responsibility, and this won't be the same for everybody, so think about what it is for you, but things will have shifted, and it might be now that actually something with a bit more meaning and fulfillment and maybe flexibility, those things suddenly become really important. And actually it's not about the status and the level of responsibility anymore. So just recognizing that for some people is a huge relief, to think I don't need to chase that anymore because that isn't what's important to me. First step, get really clear on who you are, what you need, and what you can offer. And that packaged up together is your professional DNA. And the reason it's so important to be clear on your professional DNA is because you can then use that as your anchor point. So when you're looking at future opportunities and job roles, you can then map those back against your professional DNA and think, is this right? Does this fit who I am, what I need, and what I can offer? And if it does, then great, have a look into it, pursue it. And if not, you can feel confident in saying, no, that's actually not going to work for me. That's maybe not going to be any better than where I currently am. And you can put that to one side.
I can relate to this so much, Kim. So much of what you're saying, it really brings me back. So for anyone who doesn't know, I did a career change from teaching into data and tech, and everything that you're saying, from that identifying who you are, I actually found that the hardest step, that in combination with knowing, like, you're right, it's hard to do that change. So I found it really hard to know, okay, when am I going to do that change? what am I going to do, but particularly like, actually, what can I do? Like, who am I? What am I good at? And what you said about it being very messy, my path was definitely not linear. And and I there the way that I went about it was, it was a whole, it's so cliche, but it was such a journey. But that very first step of identifying that new identity was challenging. So in a way, I had to think back as to, what am I good at? What can I do? But also what I found easier, to be honest, was those markers of success. For me, flexible working was number one reason. I had that first flavor of, so I literally went back after my first maternity leave after COVID, and everything was remote as a teacher. And once I had that flavor of remote, I said, yeah, this is going to work for me. So I remote. And then the other thing, which was always, I've always worked reduced hours, so just different variations. So that was always a factor for me. But yeah, and very, very relatable, all of those things that you said.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Thank you for sharing. Because I think sometimes if someone can hear it brought to life by someone that's been through it, then it's yeah, it makes it that much easier to believe they can do it themselves. So yeah, thanks, Emma.
No, I think, and like you said, Kim, it's a really good opportunity for people to think, okay, you can feel the friction, right? As soon as you've almost had a baby, you think, okay, well, maybe this doesn't work for me anymore, or this does, and this is what I'd like. But, if there are things that you really didn't like about your old career, and, it's a really good opportunity to think, well, what do I want to do? And you said, your perspective changes. You want to find things that bring you joy, because all the time that you're away from your family, you want to make it worth it. So you don't want to be going back to a job which you hate, or you find difficult, or you've got an awful boss, or whatever it is. That it's those things, and looking at this as a really good opportunity for that change. I think it's a great thing to do.
Yeah, and it's funny you say that. I hear that so often. Parents come to me and they say, I do want to work, but just not this version of work. And I want something that makes my time away from my family feel worthwhile. That word worthwhile comes up so often.
Believe it.
So yeah. So shall I move on to point
Yes,
two?
please.
So
Yeah, go for it.
after we've done that, we then need to zoom out, and we need to revisit forgotten passions and past interests and go beyond kind of job titles and really reconnect with what energizes you. So have a think about, what were the things that you go right back to school? What did you enjoy studying at school? Because there'll be loads of things that come up if you actually think about these things that you loved doing once upon a time, and then they've just fallen by the wayside because your career took off on a certain path and you've just carried on down that path and you've had success probably, so you've kept going. But actually, there's lots in your life that you have enjoyed and that has brought you joy that you can pick up again and use to shape your next career. And it's really difficult to gain clarity on what's next and to bring new ideas into the equation if we don't zoom out a little bit. So also think about what are the things that when you're going about your everyday life and you're having conversations or you're out places, what are the topics of conversation that you, if you overhear people talking about it, you feel like you want to jump in and join that conversation because you're like, oh, I love talking about that. I've got something to add. What are those things that really get you? Because those might be the things to explore to try and move your career in a new direction. So yeah, sometimes we need to zoom out in order to zoom back in with greater clarity.
Again, this is literally exactly what I did, and with the help of a career coach. So it was that, what on earth can I do? But what, you know, but thinking of my skills of what can I be good at. And I remember thinking back in my particular instance to my PhD, and I absolutely loved, not everyone can say this, but I absolutely loved the data and the analysis and communicating that. And it was only after having a coaching session, and then I started looking at kind of job titles, and I came across data analyst, and it kind of went from there that I realized, oh, this is I know, probably not naively, I just didn't realize that this was a career in tech necessarily. It was only when I thought back, and as you say, I zoomed out and I thought back, that's what I really loved. Then I realized, oh, this is a whole, this is a whole massive area. It's a data analyst and it's a research analyst. And that's just, the tip of the iceberg. There's a whole world of data which I didn't know about, but it really was that first step of thinking, oh, actually I did like that. And it's kind of bridging the gap, isn't it, between your past interests and your skills, and delving into the unknown, because again, I found that was such a massive barrier, where it's so overwhelming. Like, where do you start? And for me, I started with that coaching session, and then research and looking for those not the job title necessarily, but realizing that was a career, I think.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think often so many people fall into their careers, don't they? So they go to uni or they start a job and they just sort of, like you say, carry on that career path, not really necessarily thinking about what it is that they want to do longer term. And often I hear from sort of people who are maybe more creative and they love being creative at school and that was their passion, but that's not necessarily an easy career route to go into. It's not showcased as that. And actually now when they become parents, they think, oh, I love being creative. I love, doing all of those kind of things. How can I then bring that into my career going forward? Because actually I went and did an accounting qualification and that didn't really fit my, tick my boxes. But there's this creative side of me that is there and I'd love to tap into that again. So I think it's a really good idea, like you say, to think about all those things you really love and that brings you joy. That's a really good start. Yeah.
Yeah, and you have to be really intentional about it. It's not, you have to really make an effort to go back and think through the things that you've done, because they can be so lost in everything that you're caught up in now in your life, that unless you really put the work in to go back and rediscover those things and bring them back into your world, then it doesn't just happen. Yeah. So
I think it's a good point because actually, for me anyway, the intention bit didn't come at the early part of my career. So I think if you didn't do it then, it's a really good chance to be able to do that now. Fabulous. Okay, have you got step 3 for us?
yes, step 3. So I call this step just tell everyone, but I do appreciate that it's a little bit tongue in cheek, because if you're wanting to make a career change, you can't really shout from the rooftops about how unhappy you are in your current role. Your employer might not be so pleased about that. So you can't literally tell everybody, but within reason, talk to as many people as possible about how you feel about where you're at in your career and where you think you might want to go. Because the reality is that most opportunities are going to come from within your network. And unfortunately, you're going to have to work harder in this space than people who aren't making a pivot, because you're going to be up against people who do have direct experience in these roles that you're going to want to go for. So it's really important to have that know, like, and trust that comes from recommendations and comes from people who know you, who've worked with you. So you need to get yourself out there. And I know it sounds scary, but it doesn't need to be scary. It is just have conversations with people you know. Start talking to people, because even if they can't help, they will probably know somebody who can, or somebody will know someone who can. That is your network. So when we're talking about talking to people and networking, we're not talking about going to stand in a stuffy room full of people in suits with name badges on, which is, I know, the first thing that springs to mind when you think about networking. But it is just having those conversations. And when you get a bit closer to knowing what it is you might want to do, or if you have some ideas, identify I call them pivot people. So the people that are connected to your potential opportunities to make that pivot. And LinkedIn is a great tool for this, because you don't even need to know them that well. If you're connected with them on LinkedIn, you can so easily just drop them a message that just says something like, hey, I'm thinking about making a shift in my career. I'm really interested in what you do and how you've got there. Is there any chance you could spare 15 minutes just to have a chat? And it can be as simple as that, just to start opening doors and start to get things moving. And when I've spoken to clients and other parents about doing this, I've not known a single person who has had a reply that said, no, I will not speak to you. Because I think people actually find it quite flattering, you know, if someone comes to you and says, I think what you're doing is great. I think I might like to do it. You know, you think, oh, that's nice. Someone thinks what I'm doing is great. Yeah, I'll happily talk to them for, 15 minutes. So just take those steps to have those conversations.
Do you know what? You pretty much answered my question, because I was going to say, let's imagine you're someone like a teacher, and a lot of teachers might not necessarily have, that network on LinkedIn, or
Mm.
obviously, you're building up a new network. I think that is brilliant. And I think you're exactly right. Like, if someone asked me, I want to be a data analyst, yeah, absolutely. I'd love to tell them all about it, especially if you're passionate about it and, you want to spread the word. So I think that's brilliant. So just shouting about it and actually building on a new network.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I think
absolutely.
that's a really good idea. When I first saw that you had saying tell everyone, I thought you meant the people around you to almost, make you accountable for this change to sort of kickstart you into action. Because I remember when Emma was going through this,
Okay.
and she told us all, she was like, I'm going to be doing this, I'm going to be doing this course, this is, and I was like, yes, and we were like cheerleading her from behind. But it was, I know she sort of, and it wasn't a validation from us, but I think it sort of helped to know, yeah, I'm going to do this. This is the thing that I'm going to do. But actually, like you say, that building that network by just telling people, you don't know what people know and who people know, and even just be able to get some experience in that space can be really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. You're so right about the accountability piece. That's a very good point. Yeah, tell everyone for that reason too. Yeah. So we're clear on our professional DNA. We've zoomed out and we've brought new ideas into the picture and we've started talking to people about it. So step 4 is to start doing. So start taking action. And again, this can sound quite scary, but taking the small steps is what builds our confidence in the fact that we can make this change. And it moves us, it edges us closer. Every little step we take edges us closer towards our vision of where we want to get to. And then that will build confidence that we can actually get there and we can work on how we're going to get there. So, what I mean by take action is, are there any opportunities that you can kind of volunteer in the space you're trying to get to if you don't have direct experience? Can you start a side project? Are there any events that you can attend that are focused on this new area that you want to go into? Are there any opportunities maybe in your current company or organization where you can get involved with a project that is slightly more focused on something you are interested in moving into? So it might not to do with your current role, but are there any opportunities to put your hand up and say, can I help out with that project? I find that really interesting. And just try and seek out those pivot projects. So those opportunities to get involved with what it is you're thinking. Just dip your toe in the water in your target field and have a go. Start making things happen.
And I'd like to add to that, like, because I dipped my toe in the water and then I started swimming like really, really quickly, because it helped me to decide, is this actually going to be right for me? Is this a path for me? Because if you're going to do career pivot, you want to make sure it's the right decision. And again, in thinking back, so once I identified, okay, I'm going to have a look at this data analyst route, I did start looking at job roles, and I actually had 90% of the criteria. But the one thing that I didn't have was this coding language called SQL. And I was like, what's this SQL? And then Instagram, because obviously it's magical, it popped up with this advertisement for Code First Girls, and it says that you can do a free course on introduction to data and SQL. I was like, how did it know?
It's
And that's
awesome.
what it was. This, do you remember that, Amy? It was like this mad time, and I was still teaching, and it was all crazy. But I did this, I think it was an 8-week course. I did a project at the end, and I was like, right, if I do this, like, best case scenario, I know this is for me, and then I know I can potentially continue with Code First Girls and go along that route and that training, because I know that you can actually get a job at the end if you do their data science bootcamp. Worst case scenario, I've learned a bit and I've had a bit of fun, and actually I now have made a decision. No, this is not for me. A spoiler alert, I loved it. And I ended up doing boot camp in the end. But I have a backup plan. So my plan B, so I had a plan A was the data science bootcamp. Plan B was, and I started it while I was waiting to interview for Code First Girls. I did the Google data analytics certificate, and I knew that my plan B was do that certificate, do some projects to build up that experience. And again, you're building up that experience, but you're also gathering that data to help you make decisions as to what route you want to go down. Because even if you decide on that role or that career, there's loads of different layers in that role and that career. Well, there certainly is for
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
I have to say, Kim, that's great because when I was thinking about going back into my psychology route, I actually listened to loads of podcasts. So I was looking, so, you know, whereas before I was listening to parenting podcasts or whatever, I then started listening to as many psychologist podcasts about how to get on the course and how to do this and that. And that for me was enough of a tangible step where at that point I was still dipping my toe into whether that was the right thing for me at the time. And I could do that whilst the kids were there. And, you know, didn't take a huge chunk of time out of me or a lot of energy. I could do it in the background, which really helped.
Yeah, exactly. If there are any ways that you can dip your toe in and just try the things that you're considering before you commit to a route, then it is so helpful. And it gives you the confidence to know whether it really is something you're going to enjoy.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So the final step, Kim, I'm excited for this one.
Yes, the final step. So step 5 is map it out. So create a really detailed game plan of exactly how you're going to bridge the gap from where you are currently to where you want to be. Be bold, but be realistic here, because what you don't want to do is create this plan that, you know, says you're going to be a marine biologist in a month's time. Like, you don't want to do things that are going to dent your confidence, but you want to be bold. So be bold about where you're going to get to, but be realistic about how you're going to get there. So remember to factor in things like finances. What financial considerations do you have to make for this change to work? Are there any, like Emma was talking about, any training needs or retraining needs that you need to consider? Family needs. How's this new route going to fit with your family? What needs to shift or change going forwards? And then be really specific on timing. So try and set yourself, you know, I'm going to do this by this point, put dates to it just to hold yourself accountable. And so that you have a really detailed step by step of this is how I'm going to make it happen. Because like I said before, a career pivot won't just happen to you. It really is a series of intentional steps to get you to where you want to be.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful. And we always used to call it that sort of SMART target. I guess you'd call it that
Yeah.
at work too, right? You have to be very thoughtful and intentional about the steps, and being realistic is a really key thing. And I picked up there about the confidence piece, because actually we had a question around the confidence piece and, you know, how do you even start when your confidence is so low? If you can give us some advice around that, you know, you're at a point where you don't almost know where to start, you're feeling, you know, that lack of confidence. Is there any tips around that?
Yeah, I think, well, I mentioned about talking to people and start taking little steps. Talking to people really does help with confidence, because the more you can talk to people, the more it kind of releases all of the pressure that you're feeling about wanting to make a change, but not having the confidence to do it. You chat to people and they can build your confidence. Also, it's really important to remember that when you're making a career change, you are never starting again. So it might feel like you are, but you are always starting from a place of building upon everything you've done so far. So you have so much that you have done in your life and your career to date that can really help inform and shape your next path, even if it's a really different road that you're taking. You are always building on. And I have an exercise that I do with clients that looks at all your experience as like roads that come off of a central roundabout. So imagine every job that you've held so far is a road off of your roundabout. And every time you're thinking of going in a different direction, you come back to your roundabout, you bring everything that you've learned on those roads that you've been down already. So all of the skills, the knowledge, the network, the things that you've learned about yourself, bring them all back to your roundabout. They sit on that roundabout, and you then are in a really fortunate position where you can pick and choose what from that roundabout you take down the next road. So just try and imagine it. And it also takes off a bit of the pressure because you realize, well, if I go down that road and it's not quite right, it's okay. I'll come back to my roundabout. I'll reassess. I'll see what I've learned from that road and we will go again. So it's, yeah, if you imagine it like that, it does take a bit of pressure off and gives you the confidence that actually you have got a lot to take forwards.
And I really wish I could go back to my past self. And if anyone is listening now and is going through career change, because with hindsight, I did not realize how many transferable skills I had. And it took me, it was really just a few weeks into the position. I was like, oh, of course I can do all of these things. They're skills that I have. They're just in a different capacity. And I was to go back, tell my past self to boost my confidence a little bit. You have the skills, they're just transferable, so you can translate it.
Yeah, I really love that idea of the roundabout. I can imagine myself sort of going in, doing a U-turn, be like, oh no, go back and spin around again. That is really, and I think it's like you say, it takes that pressure off. It's, you've got all this with you, you've got this ammo sort of to go into the next bit. Just be confident with that. So that's a really good piece of advice. Thank you. Well, thank you, Kim. I think it was really helpful going through your 5 steps. And we do have one question that's come in, if you wouldn't mind just answering this one before we leave you. But what is the biggest mistake that parents make when pivoting their careers?
Yeah, good one. The biggest mistake I see is that people tend to, when they're feeling a bit lost or stuck in their careers, they jump straight into scrolling jobs boards and applying for jobs. And the reason why that is so dangerous is because at that point, when you're just in a job you're not enjoying, you are purely motivated away from the things you don't like about your current situation. You are not clear on what you are motivated towards. So the chances of you finding something that is going to fit better with what you're looking for are slim because you don't know what you're looking for, which is why going back to those 5 points we've just talked through, especially the first one around your professional DNA, understanding that so you have a blueprint to come back to when you're looking at opportunities is so important. So figure out what you're motivated towards, not just what you're motivated away from, before you start applying for jobs.
What a good piece of advice, and you're right. It's so easy to do that, isn't it? And think, oh, I just don't want to do that. Well, I don't know what I want to do. Someone will give me the green light. But yeah, you have to start from within. So thanks for that, Kim. That's brilliant. So thank you so much for those sort of tangible steps. It really has helped. I mean, even for me now, thinking about how you could change and pivot into something else, it's been really helpful. And for anybody who wants to find out more about what you are doing and the services that you can offer, they can find you at kimhollandcoaching.co.uk at your website, and you're also at parent_career_pivot on Instagram. And we're also going to be sharing some of Kim's tools with you all on our new parent toolkit on our 5 Hour Club website. So there is a new free career MOT where you can jump in and take a look at where you're at right now from Kim. And there's also a special price on her 90-minute career game plan session for our 5 Hour Club members. So take a look at all of those on the website. Take a look at Kim and her website. If you are looking to change career, I think you're a fabulous person to start with. You've helped us all here today. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Kim.
Take
Bye-bye.
care. Bye.